and welcome back to our third day and deliberations of our 3-year plan. Welcome to everybody, and just a reminder, of course, that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed via our council Facebook page. I will also just be looking at the Standing Order 4.2 meeting duration again, and that's pursuant to Standing Order 4.2, an extension of time until 5 p.m. on the 29th of May 2024 in case we need longer than 6 hours for our deliberations. I'll move that. Are you happy to second, Deputy Mayor? Thank you very much. Also, just a few reminders around the standing orders while we work through deliberations today. Standing Order 21.2, time limits on speakers. So the following time limits apply to elected members speaking at these meetings. Movers of motions, when speaking to the motion, have a maximum of 5 minutes. And mover of motions, when exercising right of reply, again, no more than 5 minutes, and other members, no more than 5 minutes. Time limits can be extended if a motion to that effect is moved, seconded, and supported by the majority of the members present. Also, a reminder of Standing Order 21.6 and the limit on number of speakers. If 3 speakers have spoken consecutively in support of or in opposition to a motion, the chairperson may call for a speaker to the contrary. If there is no speaker to the contrary, the chairperson must put the motion after the mover's right of reply. Members speaking must, if required by the chairperson, announce whether they are speaking in support of or opposition to a motion. I can also suspend this standing order if all members wish to speak to the motion. So just some reminders there of these procedural matters. Right, so we've got a big day ahead of us, so we will get right into it, and I would invite Jess Allen just to do a very brief introduction of the day ahead.
Good morning. So I'm just going to introduce the paper. So we have a paper which has been prepared by council staff, which summarises the submissions on the 3-year plan. So first of all, we're going to hear from SIL Research. So they have prepared the analysis on the submissions that we've received. So we're going to have Virgil and Natalia come and present some analysis on the submissions. And then we're going to hear very briefly from Steph to provide an overview of the consultation itself. And then Danica will run us through the paper and the analysis that officers have provided and presented on the submissions, and then we'll go through subject by subject and hear from staff who will be here to answer questions on the subjects, and we'll go through and deliberate on the 3-year plan. So Virgil and Natalia, ask you to come up and present some analysis on the submissions.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you very much for allowing us to come in and make a brief presentation. What we're going to do this morning is outline the methodology that we undertook in doing the analysis on the consultation documents, and then Danica will come up and present the findings in a little bit more detail. So first of all, SIL Research was asked to assist Napier City Council with the 3-year plan consultation. We worked with Council to develop an online survey, which was based on the documents that were agreed to by Council. The consultation was open between 25th of March and the 26th of April. And in addition to the consultation document, Council housing tenants received a paper copy of the consultation form, which included questions regarding the future of Council's housing provision. So overall, we had 78 hard copy submissions. These were processed by us, and 57 of these came from tenants. We did receive some duplicate responses. There were 42 that were received. These were from the same people, the same contact details. So in consultation with Napier City Council, we aggregated these into a single submission per person, so every voice was still heard. Where additional clarification was required, respondents who submitted several forms were followed up by phone to validate their responses. So there's two types of data that are presented in the report. The first one is quantitative. So we calculated the findings in the document based on 837 submissions, and you'll see in the document too that percentages were adjusted to exclude those that had no answer, because many didn't provide an answer to every single question. From a qualitative perspective, that's all of the open-ended responses that were provided. We use what we call a content analysis approach to determine certain themes and concepts. Basically what this means is that we go into reading every single response with no presumptions as to what people are going to say or themes, and from reading every single response, we generate and create themes so that we can categorise the responses into either one or several categories. So just reiterating, every single response was read fully by our analysis team and was put into categories that makes it more user-friendly for you in your decision-making process. So the consultation provided an opportunity for respondents to express their views outside of the provided answer options. So in addition to the specifics of the questions that were asked, there was also an opportunity for people to make comments and provide feedback outside of that. And these comments were analysed and included in the public feedback section for each consultation topic. That's our summary of the methodology. Danica.
Thank you very much.
Morning. I think my PowerPoint should be coming up. Cool. Great, so just here to provide a bit of an overview of the report that I'm sure everyone's the officer's report. So that was the main agenda item for this one. Yeah, this way. There we go. Cool. So this report summarises submissions received on the 3-year plan consultation document and seeks final decisions for incorporation into Napier City Council's 3-year plan. That's due to be adopted on the 27th of June. As mentioned, we received analysis support from the independent research company Cell Research, and they've already run you through the methodology. The full report from Cell can be found as an attachment to the officer's report, and this officer's report incorporates Cell's analysis and provides further officer analysis along with recommendations. It also addresses some of the other key topics that were brought up by submitters that were in addition to the consultation topics. So just a bit of a summary. Some of these facts were covered by Virgil as well, which is good. So the LGA requires council use the special consultative procedure to consult with the community before adopting the final plan. So this process involved the adoption of the consultation document by council on the 14th of March. Consultation was open for 5 weeks from the 25th of March to the 26th of April, and that was supported by 6 community meetings and drop-in sessions, just as noted on the slide. So any member of the public could submit either online or via a hard copy form, and in total, as already mentioned, we received 837 submissions. More detail about the engagement approach can be found as an attachment to the full report. So just jumping into feedback received on key consultation topics. So just a quick reminder of what those topics were. So the future of council housing, noting that we asked 2 questions for this one. Building up of our community resilience, a new approach to managing council's investments, reviewing our fees and charges, a change to how we fund some tourist facilities, and Napier City Council's office accommodation. So this report doesn't go into the detail about each of these topics, as that was covered by the report that was taken when the consultation document was adopted. Just to keep it brief, I'll provide a quick overview of the results for each of these topics, just noting that the report details the officer analysis and recommendations, and then also Cell Research's report provides extra details around any of the extra comments that Virgil mentioned were made through the submissions. So first topic, the future of council housing. So as noted previously, this was a two-part question. In question 1, all respondents were asked, should we continue to deliver our current housing approach by increasing rates and borrowing, or should we shift council's focus to retirement housing only and sell our social housing villages? So the second piece there was council's preferred option. Of the submitters that answered the question, 491 agreed with council's preferred option and 111 supported the status quo. So shown up on the slides, this equates to 59% support of council's preferred option. In question 2, all respondents were asked, if we shift to a focus on retirement housing, how can council deliver this in an effective way? So council's preferred option was a retirement focus with a mixed delivery approach. Of those submitters that answered the question, 280 supported council's preferred option, 122 supported independent delivery, and 49 supported the current approach. So this equates to 57% support of council's preferred option. On to building up our community resilience. In this one, respondents were presented with two options, so continue with the rate to build resilience, which was the preferred, or don't continue with the rate. Of those that answered the question, 341 supported council's preferred option, and 249 supported not continuing with the rate, which equates to 41% support for the preferred option. Next one was a new approach to managing council's investments. So we had three options here. Create a council-controlled trading organisation to establish a commercially focused investment portfolio, which was the preferred. Manage the investment portfolio with any council, or the status quo. So of those submitters that answered, we had 308 supporting council's preferred option, 167 supporting managing investments within council, and 70 supporting the status quo. So when taking into account those that did not answer the question, this equates to 37% support for council's preferred option. Then reviewing our fees and charges. There were two for this one, so increase some fees and charges beyond the CPI increase of 5.6%, or the status quo, which was adjust fees and charges in line with the CPI increase. Of those submitters that answered the question, 210 supported council's preferred option and 349 supported the status quo. This equates to 25% support for council's preferred option and 42% support for the status quo. Since council's preferred option didn't receive as much support for this one, I just wanted to highlight a few key points from the report. So the analysis when answering the question showed that many respondents commented on their concern around the rates increase in the high cost of living. The analysis also notes that submitters believed that increasing some fees and charges by more than CPI would add to the existing financial pressures on households. The financial information provided in the report and the table shown up on the screen shows that only increasing fees and charges by 5.6% effectively costs the ratepayer $4.2 million. So this works out to about $140 extra per household, which is equivalent to 4.7% rates increase in addition to the 23.7% proposed. So this information shows that although council's preferred option wasn't as supported, it reduces the overall rates burden on households when compared to the status quo. Increasing some fees and charges by more than CPI helps ensure the cost burden of services sits with the user rather than being distributed across households that might not use a particular service. Then the next topic, a change to how we fund some tourist facilities. So for this one, there were two options. Loan fund the deficits of the three facilities that will become financially self-sufficient commercial businesses, So those being Napier Conferences and Events, Ocean Spa and Kennedy Park. And that was Council's preferred option. And then the status quo, which is continue to fund the deficits with rates with rates. So of the submitters that answered the question, 438 supported Council's preferred option and 96 supported the status quo. So that equates to 52% support of Council's preferred option. And then the last topic was Napier City Council office accommodation. So we had two options for this one. Council strengthens and redevelops the library tower for its staff, which was preferred, or sell the library tower to a developer and lease back the building for council staff. So of those who answered the question, 309 supported Council's preferred option and 225 supported the sell and lease back approach. So that's 37% support of Council's preferred option when taking into account those that didn't answer the question. So just on to other issues raised by submitters. So there were a number of different topics that were raised by submitters that were in addition to the consultation items. So some of these topics included concerns about rates increase and council spending, labour costs and the preservation of cultural and historical assets such as the Faraday and the aquarium. I won't go into detail about these here, but further information can be found in both the officer's report and Cell Research's report. Council also received other funding requests and proposals through submissions. Some of these have been included in a table as an attachment to this report, and other more complex requests have been noted by Council as they've gone through and read all of the submissions. Through deliberations, Council will have the chance to equally discuss and consider all requests. And the report also includes a few other recommended changes, which I also won't detail here because there'll be time to discuss them in deliberations, but I'll just quickly list them off. So the funding of the coastal hazard strategy and minor operational amendments. These are recommended changes to the financial information underlying the 3-year plan, and also the rollback of the change to the stormwater map is being recommended too. So that's all from me in terms of an overview. Happy to take any questions, but just noting that as part of deliberations, we'll have the topic experts available to answer any of those, so maybe better to save them for that time.
Excellent, thank you very much, Danica. Any questions of Danica or Steph regarding the officer's report? No. Very clear and good summary of the feedback we've received, so thank you. Thanks. So we'll move into our deliberations now. Just so you're aware, I will be breaking these down and we will be voting as we go. I think that's going to be a far simpler way to do it rather than Councillor Bogan.
Just a procedural question. The other issues that weren't part of our plan, will they be also debated and voted on? Thank you.
So we will be broken down into sections. First up, we will have the key consultation topics, and then that will be followed by the other council-led changes for deliberation. So those are the things that have come through the submissions that weren't part of the key consultation items. We will then be looking at the officer-led changes for deliberation, and we'll finish off with funding requests.
Cool, thank you.
So we'll get started with key consultation topics, and these we have staff speaking to, and the first one is the future of, actually I'll just take one step back. The first part of our officer's recommendation today is actually to receive and consider all submissions made on the 3-year plan 2024-27 consultation document. So I am actually just going to ask for a mover and seconder. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Thank you, Councillor Tariha. Anyone have any comments on that one? Councillor Simpson?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I think the resolution's actually quite a light one. I think we actually need to recognise all of the submitters, and especially those that came and presented to us, because I think it's a really significant result that we got the feedback that we did from our community, and hopefully that enlightens us into the decisions that we're going to make. So I thought the resolution itself just didn't acknowledge the time and effort that our residents had put in.
So just acknowledge and thank all the community members who provided feedback on our consultation document. Thank you. As our mover and seconder, happy to accept that amendment. Councillor Bogue. Oh,
We already
No?
had a move.
Oh, do you want to move in a second?
no, I already had one.
Oh, sorry. No, that's it.
If there's no further comments, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Excellent. So now we'll move into our key consultation topics. And the first cab off the rank is the future of council housing. So I'd invite Anne to come and talk to this. And we do also have a representative from Simpson Grierson online to assist us with our deliberations on this topic. And Carolyn, if I could just ask you to pop up the officer's recommendation, just so we've got that on screen while we work through this. Is there no one online? Oh, okay. We were running a bit ahead of time, so he hopefully will join us.
We are a little bit ahead of time.
Yeah.
Chris Ryan from Simpson Grierson is going to join us this morning in place of Mike Wakefield because Mike was busy. But he will be joining us hopefully shortly.
Can you just share this portion?
So officers have listened to the submitters that we heard yesterday and the day before, and we've read the submissions. Some of our submitters did not want to sell any of our council assets, but overall there was general support for our preferred approach. So officers aren't changing our recommendations based on the submissions. And we're really open to you to ask us any questions following the last couple of days.
Thank you, Anne. And just a reminder, obviously, of the officer's recommendation is that shift council's focus to delivering retirement housing only and divest some council-owned housing, mixed delivery approach as per council's preferred option. So part 1 of the recommendation, direct officers to develop an implementation plan for shifting council's focus towards delivering retirement housing only under a mixed delivery approach. And 2, direct officers to execute the divestment of Napier City Council's 3 social housing villages, Nelson Place, Wellesley Place and Carlisle Place. And 3, direct officers to engage with affected tenants, community members and interest parties as appropriate. So I will just open up for any questions of the council officers. I think we all have a very good understanding. We've obviously worked through quite a lengthy process to arrive at our preferred option that we consulted on. So if there's no questions.
Madam Chair, while the councillors are thinking
Yep.
about questions, may I just say that, first of all, I do want to thank the staff for putting this all together and the work that they've done under really difficult circumstances, as we've heard from a few of the submitters. Also want to thank the submitters for what they've brought to the table, and then also our residents that's living in our houses. The staff is really doing their best to try and keep them as calm and informed as possible. So, but also for council, want to thank council for your open and willingness to listen to this and to put it forward as one of the 3-year plan items. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Funas, and very well said. I mean, the staff have managed this and been in constant communication with our tenants, which has been vital. And we did receive feedback from a submitter that they felt that the communication had been very good. So thank you for that. And we do now have Chris Ryan online with us. Welcome, Chris. We're literally just about to start the discussion, so good to have you with us here today. So a question, Councillor Crystal? Yep.
Through the chair, just in relation to divesting the properties, we've spoken about that no one will lose their home, and also that potentially that when we divest that it goes to a social housing provider. So how does this work with the divesting?
So there's so many possibilities or sub-options under the option. So we have talked about no one losing their home. we haven't been that prescriptive about how we might divest. And I think in this situation here, we're trying to outline what we will put into our 3-year plan. So if we're looking at divesting the 3 social housing providers, which is what officers are recommending, the more prescriptive we are as regards to our activities in the 3-year plan could trip us up in the future. So we have taken into account the 5 either principles or priorities that the council has spoken to us about previously, and one of those is that no one will have a home, but we haven't been any more prescriptive on how we would divest those villages.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Anne and Thunis and the team for pulling it together. One of the things I'm trying to get straight in my mind is the actual functional difference of independent delivery model versus mixed delivery model. So I see in our consultation there's a little box that says, what does mixed delivery mean? And it says mixed delivery means our housing villages could be delivered by council plus the potential for delivering by other providers. So being that I think council's pretty keen to obviously retain ownership of the assets in the retirement space, won't we always, even if we went with an independent delivery model, be delivering council housing? I'm just trying to figure out what is the functional difference between if we say mixed or if we say independent, if we have this underlying assumption that we retain ownership.
Yes, so through the mixed delivery approach, we could look at transferring some of the units to a community housing provider. The mixed delivery approach also looked at redeveloping some of the villages. I think it looked at Green Meadows because there is a lot of land around that village that is zoned residential. So there was more opportunities under the mixed delivery approach. Option 2C, which was the independent delivery approach, was talking about transferring it to another provider as the only part of that approach.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so just to clarify, independent definition of independent delivery is transferring the asset.
It means that the service will be provided by other housing providers on the council's behalf.
So actually, sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, actually there's very little difference if the underlying assumption is that we retain ownership. Mixed just provides us slightly more flexibility on who that potential other partner is.
Yes. And it would depend, so with an independent approach, under the mixed or under option 2C, the council, I think what you're suggesting is the council would have control over who we transferred the housing to. And through an independent delivery approach, there possibly could be redevelopment of some of the villages if that's what the independent delivery partner, if that was an approach that they wanted to take as well. So, yeah.
Do you mind if I continue,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor? So if we were to, and now I'm thinking financial impact for ratepayers, so if we acknowledge that we could achieve the same thing through both, depending on what conditions we obviously put on any negotiations with any external partner, either under mixed or under independent. So the financial impact on ratepayers under an independent model, we've had, for instance, submitters provide alternative options, which is what we asked for in our submissions, where they return money to the ratepayer, versus a mixed model. In the officer's report, we don't have an option where that returns money to the ratepayer. I guess what I'm trying to get at is there, in your view, an option where we could go to market, achieve the same outcomes for our tenants and return money to rates?
Yes, there is an option. So one of the tricky things that we discussed through our workshops and through earlier decisions is this is a bit of a tricky process where we've had to go out for consultation prior to talking to the market. And so we do need, the next step is to talk to the market. And that's something that can be indicated in your decision on the 3-year plan, how we best go about doing that. So I think the decision today is what we're going to include in the 3-year plan and how that might, and how we might go out for a procurement approach to deliver.
Yeah.
So just what I'm hearing is that currently the officer's recommendation is a mixed delivery model. We have had some submissions that present to us an independent delivery model. We don't want to preclude, I think, ourselves from further investigation into either of those paths. And so is it possible to include in our resolution that we would actually look at delivering our strategic housing priorities under a mixed or an independent delivery model approach? Could we include both of those in the resolution to enable us to, when we go to market, still be able to explore those two options?
I think so. I'm looking at Chris here. And you're behind the mayor, Chris, in my eyesight. Yeah, I don't know if you have any comments. I think that would be possible, yes?
Yes, it would be possible, but I think it would be important to flag that increases the chance of needing to consult again once you have a particular proposal in mind, just because if there's going to be transfer of a strategic asset, which includes the council's social housing stock, that proposal needs to be provided for in the LTP. And so just the less certainty that there is in the LTP, the greater the likelihood is that any particular proposal that you settle on later won't be provided for particularly.
Thank you, Chris. Just following up on that, so if our resolution was clear that the divestment of, say, only the 3 social housing villages were the only strategic asset we were interested in potentially divesting through any go-to-market proposal negotiation situation, that would remove the requirement to reconsult if in the end those are the only strategic assets we're looking to divest?
That would certainly reduce the risk. I just hesitate because depending on the commercial arrangement that was put in place for the remainder of the villages, that might constitute a transfer of control, to which Section 97 also applies. So it's any sale or transfer of control.
Can I question that, in that both the mixed, through you, the Mayor, sorry, both the mixed and the independent definitions involve some level of divestment of control. So could we not include that also in our resolution?
Yes, you could. I'm just hesitating because the case law on Section 97 is about exactly how much certainty there is in advance, and how much the proposal that ends up being. So, say the transfer of some villages the transfer of control of some villages to be delivered by independent non-council agencies. Exactly how that arrangement, we don't know what that arrangement would look like in the moment, because as Anne mentioned, there hasn't been the opportunity to go to the market yet. And so I agree that the more that you can put in the resolution now, the better. But I don't want to foreclose the possibility that once there is an actual proposal in mind, that there might be the need to do some further consultation.
Thank you, Mayor Wise. And Chris, I think what I'm taking from your discussion is that there will always be a potential to reconsult, and that all we can do at this stage is try and be as prescriptive and clear as possible, that around that control and transfer of any strategic assets, and then there will always be a risk that we would have to have the discussion again with community, depending on the outcome of market negotiations, sounding, etc.
Yes, I think that is a fair summary. But the only other thing that I would note at this point is just that it is important that the resolution that's made now doesn't go beyond the scope of what was consulted on. So, for instance, in the consultation document, you weren't consulting the public on the criteria with which independent or mixed delivery model might be delivered, and so I think you might also want to make sure that the resolution includes, or that the resolution provides for the ability for the community to have further input into that as might be necessary. But otherwise, yes, I agree.
That's helpful. Thank you, Madam Wise.
Venus.
Through you, Chairman. Just wanting to come back a few steps from what the Deputy Mayor asked about, the benefit that the community will get out of this. I think that with the discussion that's gone on, it's answered a little bit of what I was going to say, but it's about we went with the mixed model that Council agreed on to give us those options so that we can go out to the market and see what is out there. And that was the purpose of having the mixed model. I think the point is that when we get to the point where we've got, and when we get out or go out, we'll have to set very clear parameters or criteria. The more criteria we set, and I think we heard it yesterday from Nasoho, is that, the more criteria you set, the less the benefit could be to us or to the community. And that's going to come through the negotiations. So, yeah, I just wanted to make that point that we did choose that, and Council agreed that we used the mixed model that will help us to cast the net as broad as we can.
Councillor Bogue, then Councillor Mawson.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. I understood from the document that we consulted on that we talked about mixed delivery. I don't recall us commenting about the possibility of us selling any of those flats that we would be retaining. So I know when I was at meetings talking about the consultation document, people were quite confused what the mixed delivery side of it all meant. But I really didn't have any thoughts that it meant that we would be possibly going out to the market for somebody to purchase or lease those.
No, that's correct. So and I guess what we're sort of teasing out here is a mixed delivery versus an independent delivery. So it's not, so that independent delivery is not around selling the assets, it's around allowing an independent party to provide the services to the tenants.
Is that all we're talking about?
So yeah, it's just sort of teasing that out. Councillor Mawson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just taking a sidestep on what we've been talking about, but similar, because there's been a lot of talk about clarity in our resolution. Just seeing the level of comfort amongst the councillors to just number 2 in the resolution there, direct officers to execute divestment, but at no point does it say to come back to council with those options.
Good point. Thank you, Councillor Mawson. We'll note that as we carry on with the deliberations. Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, through the Mayor. One of the key issues raised in our submissions was uncertainty for our tenants. And I'm concerned, and even from our lawyers, there's concern about uncertainty. I'm a little bit concerned that we're sort of going in circles with this issue. And I'm wondering, do we have a clear process of what the decisions are going to be going forward with a bit of timeline? So we've got a little bit of certainty of where, not necessarily where we're going to land, but how we're going to get there.
Yes, through the chair. So next steps following a decision, whatever the decision is going to be, this will be looked at by our strategy and transformation team, and it will be set up as a project. So we are looking at setting this up as a project following this decision, and the tenants are our number one priority, and I'm sure that they're the council's number one priority as well. They are waiting to hear from us when the council makes a decision, and we will be letting them know what the decision is, and we will be keeping them at the forefront of all the work that we do.
So once that project team is notified of the decision of council today, we will then be have them come back to us with a project timeline and some gateways and etc.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if it's useful now, so and just to sort of actually remind all of us of what our priorities were in terms of, or the key principles were in terms of our council housing portfolio. And I would be keen to include these as part of the resolution, because then it is very much front of mind for all parties that are involved going forward once the decision is made. And so the 5 strategic priorities for the council housing portfolio were: number 1, all current tenants will have a home. Number 2, it is financially sustainable for council and the tenants. Number 3, over time, move away from providing social housing. Number 4, the portfolio maintains and increases over time the retirement housing unit numbers. And number 5, enable investment in the condition of the housing portfolio, including ensuring all are warm and dry. So I think we actually include that as the first point in our resolution, because it's really, really important that we don't lose focus. That is what everything that we've done to date has been underpinned by those 5 priorities. So, Councillor McGrath.
Just through the chair, I think someone mentioned in things the model that the Christchurch Council were using. Had they gone to a CCTO and were able to get external funding from having done that? I'm not sure if it was Christchurch or Palmerston or both. When we say we're going to go to the market or go to look at things, are we potentially going to look at ourselves as well and our opportunities that we could have for setting up something to run the model differently where we would be eligible for government funding?
So at the moment, councils are not eligible for government funding. There is a review of Kaingaora underway, and that is a possibility, but it is not confirmed yet. There's a couple of different examples of what has happened across the country. One was in Christchurch, where they did transfer their houses to a community housing provider. The existing tenants were not eligible for the subsidised rent, so Christchurch City Council pays the differential rent for those existing tenants. I think it's been about 8 years since that model was put in place, and the existing tenant numbers have dropped by half, so that the subsidised rent that Christchurch City Council is paying has decreased over time and will continue to decrease when those existing tenants leave. There's other examples in Nelson where they have transferred to Kaingaora. They had a sale price for 142 units of $19.8 million, but $5 million was kept back, and the council didn't receive that money because the units needed quite a bit of maintenance.
So they're not examples of council-controlled organisations running the chip. They're just separate.
Yeah, separate. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like to just put on the table and get discussion on the divestment of the 3 social housing villages as part of the resolution. So obviously in the officer's recommendation, it includes that we direct officers to execute the divestment of the 3 social housing villages, and just wanting to hear the views on us including that as part of the resolution, and whether we want to add anything to that. But is there general agreement that, based on the feedback we've received and the officer's recommendation, that we would like to, over time, divest our 3 social housing villages? Councillor Green.
Yes, through the Mayor, thank you. Through the Scylla research that we've seen, it was a clear emphasis that people are keen to support retirement housing because we're an ageing population. So that's all I wanted to say on that.
Thank you. Councillor Crystal.
Just through the chair, I guess just following on from what Councillor Mawson said, when we divest, is that going to come back to us with the options of the divesting? Is that something we need to put in here or here? That's kind of where I'm heading.
Councillor Crown. Yeah, thank you through you, Madam Mayor. I agree with you, Councillor Crystal. I think we need to probably specify an expectation around a procurement approach, or some wording around that, so that we have some certainty about what will come to us and provide our staff with that clarity to exactly what we're looking for in that space. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was initially, when we went into the proposals around this, really concerned around us selling off any of the assets. And you remember we had this conversation when we were putting together our preferred option. I feel like the divestment of the social housing villages has got to be our compromise in this discussion, is where I've got to, so that we can enable the remainder or the balance of the portfolio to return an income to ratepayers. So my only level of comfort with us divesting those social housing villages, provided they go to someone who is delivering housing, is that the trade-off for that is that the balance of the assets or the balance of the portfolio that the ratepayers hold has got to return an income to them over time. I was initially hopeful we could see, a proposal as part of the submissions that would allow us to retain all of the portfolio and return an income. I think that was blue sky thinking, I think, and what we've seen through the submissions was that would be the trade-off for allowing the rest of the portfolio to deliver what we want in terms of those 5 strategic priorities for our tenants and for our ratepayers. So, yeah, where I've got to is that's got to be our compromise in this discussion, is the divestment of those 3 villages to enable the rest to be successful.
Any further comments on that? So,
Just a question about that through you, Madam Mayor. So you're suggesting that once those are divested, that the money goes back into the rest of the housing portfolio?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to round off, I guess, my thinking on what an ideal situation would look like is we would divest those 3 villages in partnership with whoever we come up with as part of this going to market situation, so that enables them to deliver on the rest of the portfolio. So yes, the money goes back into the retirement housing, and there's an ongoing annual return to council from the retirement housing due to our ability to enable those 3 to be divested. Yeah.
And through the chair, that was what our modelling showed, that was the reason why we were divesting, so we could put the money back into the rest of the housing portfolio. So all our modelling and in the consultation document, all the numbers in there showed the money being reinvested back into the housing portfolio.
So we've got part A of the resolution is just resolving and adopting and reconfirming the 5 strategic priorities. I'd like to suggest that part B is that we are agreeing to the divestment of our 3 social housing villages. But do we actually want to set some additional criteria around that divestment process? And I absolutely agree with the comment made by Councillor Crown around directing or having officers develop a procurement approach, which needs to come back to council for approval. And essentially that procurement approach outlines how they would be going out to market, what that call for proposals would look like, and how a preferred provider would actually be identified. Councillor Brown.
Just thinking procedurally on that, do we need to decide things like whether or not we want to make sure that the potential purchaser is going to retain social housing, or would that come at the next step, do you see?
And that's something I'm probably quite keen to get some advice from Chris on today, in terms of whether this is the appropriate mechanism to actually set some criteria for that procurement approach and eventual contract that may be entered into. So, or is that starting to get too prescriptive? Should that be sitting outside of the resolution that we make today?
And we just retain delegation.
And we, as council, retain delegation for council officers to come back to us once that criteria has been established.
That would be my suggestion, just because I think that simplifies the approach going forward in terms of giving officers the chance to come back to you with some advice, but also means that you're not making decisions that, you know, the kind of criteria that would be attached to the sale of social housing villages wasn't really at issue in the LTP document. So I think it will give you the opportunity to consider that and consider whether that's something you'd like to go back to the community with. So I think it'd be appropriate for the moment just to say that the LTP will provide for that divestment, but that you want officers to come back to you with how they intend to go to market with that and on what basis.
Thank you, Chris. That's really useful. So I'd like to propose that we have Part B of the resolution being that we agree to the divestment of our NCC's 3 social housing villages, Nelson Place, Wellesley Place and Carlisle Place, and that we add a C to direct officers to develop a procurement approach to be approved by council that includes a call for proposals and preferred provider with assessment based on key criteria to be developed and approved by council. Might not have that wording quite right.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, would it be possible, acknowledging that I think that wording around noting that council maintains the delegation on the criteria and the final decisions on both the divestment and the contracting of any delivery model, I think that's really appropriate to include. So your suggestions there are really valid. One of the things that I wonder is through the submission process we've received essentially these criteria for the delivery of the model, i.e. whoever we get to deliver, either in a mixed way or an independent way, needs to deliver those strategic priorities for us. They need to return an income to ratepayers from the balance of the portfolio. I feel like after we saw the submissions and some of the proposals, we need to be explicit that we're not looking at divesting any of the land, as Councillor Bogue said, and that the divestment of those social housing villages is kind of on the basis that the rest of the portfolio is looked after into the future. It's not that we would divest and then not allow that to fund the... Like there's some conditions, if you know what I mean, to our agreeing to divest and enter a delivery model that we've seen. And I just wonder, rather than coming back with those, because I think we should come back with the how, but what that criteria is would be, in my mind, quite helpful to include in our resolution.
And I guess what I heard from Chris was that we might be starting to get too prescriptive if we include that as part of our resolution, but that we can direct council officers that there needs to be a set of criteria established, which can be workshopped with elected members, so that we're part of developing those, and that then they come back to us as part of the adoption of the procurement approach. Just wondering if it's a little early in the process now to include that as part of the 3-year plan.
I was just going to say through the chair, I think officers would welcome criteria because it helps us to do our job better. We would welcome coming back to you in a workshop to develop criteria. And my understanding is if we develop criteria now and include it in the resolution, when we go out for procurement, if we don't get someone that meets all that criteria, we may need to consult again, and Chris might be able to confirm that for us.
Yes, that's correct. I think if you really wanted to include direction at this point, the way that I would frame it is that staff go away, develop a procurement plan in light of X, Y, and Z criteria, and then they'll come back to council and discuss that rather than including it in the kind of the agree to divest part of the resolution.
And through the chair, we could have a workshop before we develop the procurement plan, if that would be helpful.
Sorry, through the chair, I think your inclusion in the 5 strategic priorities and that proposal, you could, in this part of the resolution, reference those back, because I think in terms of those 5 criteria, 5 priorities, which is what we have consulted on, they are not dissimilar to the criteria that you're talking about. So whilst it doesn't limit us to specific criteria and put us at potential risk, it is very much saying similar things about being financially sustainable, about moving away from social housing, increasing retirement units over time, and investing in that kind of property condition. But you're maintaining those retirement villages too, as you talked to in your strategic priorities.
So we could include in the resolution to wrapped up in the development of the procurement approach that direct council officers to set key criteria for delivery based on the 5 strategic priorities for the future of council's housing portfolio.
I like that.
Right. And I guess the final part, Councillor Brown, then Councillor Simpson, and then Councillor Price.
I think it's worthwhile us including explicitly that the proceeds of any sale would be ring-fenced for retirement housing, and we could just add that onto the B that you had. I think it was a B. So prosecute the divestment of the blah, blah, blah villages, ring-fencing.
Sale process would be ring-fenced for investment in the housing portfolio.
Yeah.
Councillor Simpson?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. The Chief Executive stole my thunder. I was going to suggest that we just backed back a little bit.
Yeah.
We looked at the principles, because the principles don't explicitly say, but they imply that we're going to continue to maintain, we're going to continue to improve, which means we're going to continue to own. So I think we don't need to get too explicit, and as we've been advised, the more explicit we become, the more likely it is we head to consultation, although I think we're probably going to end up there anyway. So I think the lighter this is, the more options it presents if we do need to go to consultation.
Councillor Price.
Yeah, mine's just a quick question, and it mightn't be possible, but I'm thinking, is there some way we can put, excuse me, some sort of timelines in? Yeah. Just for reassurance to people, because we've gone through this, now we're shifting a little bit.
So look, through the chair, the team may be able to answer it more specifically, but I think what we've heard is we're standing up a project, and that project team will be coming back to you with those stage gates and timeline as soon as we've got the direction from today. So I don't know, you could perhaps put something in, but as I say, it would be probably hard to say when the outcome might be delivered, but certainly the first workshop can be held within the next month or so, once that project's been stood up.
You think, and that answers it, but it just shows that at some stage we still want to keep a timeline in there, how we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. And I think actually that lends itself to the first part of the officer's recommendation, which was to direct officers to develop an implementation plan for shifting council's focus towards delivering retirement housing only under a mixed delivery approach. And I think that's the final component of this that we just need to tease out, is that mixed delivery model, which was obviously our preferred option, and whether that we want to tie ourselves into purely being able to go out and potentially negotiate a mixed delivery approach, or whether we want the flexibility to still be able to investigate an independent delivery model. So I'd like to hear thoughts on that, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm, through you, Your Worship, really supportive of us because we're going to market keeping both avenues open. I think what we asked for, we got in terms of some alternative proposals, and I'm I'm confident that when they do, the team do go to market, they'll probably see something as a hybrid between what we're thinking at this stage, all with those key outcomes achieved. So it would be nice to not lock ourselves into council needing to continue to resource some of that delivery if there is another option that achieves the same outcomes independently.
Thank you. And acknowledging that we have had advice from Chris that may open us up to having to consult again, but I think this is such a complex subject that there's probably that risk from all manner of different parts of what we yeah. Keen to hear other views around the inclusion of further investigation and independent, and again, this is not about divestment, this is about the delivery model. So having the flexibility to further look at whether that's a mixed model or could potentially be an independent model. Councillor Crystal.
Yes, just through the chair, I think that's a good idea because then it doesn't exclude people that we want as many people coming to us with their ideas as we possibly can, because that will give us the best outcome for our tenants. And at the end of the day, that is actually what's the most important.
Thank you. Any further comments? So just a bit of a summary, and between Carolyn and the Deputy Mayor, they're both jointly doing taking notes from the comments that are being made, because it can be quite a big job to keep up with everything. But we will pop up on the screen, I think, where we've got to on this. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, through the Mayor, just one final thing. I'd really like to reiterate what Councillor Price said around timelines. And we've heard from the Chief Executive that they could come back within a month. Can we lock in the meeting or like when we will be coming back to the public with that project timeline and the procurement or the first decisions, that first decision step?
I think we can, when we get the words up, we can look to include a time frame to have that.
Madam Chair, just to mention that in a month's time we wouldn't have approved this plan yet.
And it might not be that. I think we'll discuss and we'll get your advice on what you think would be an appropriate time frame to come back to us.
Thank you.
Okay, so here we have essentially part one of the resolution being that we resolved to adopt those 5 strategic priorities. Part two, agree to the divestment of the 3 social housing villages over the. Do we want to specify that it's over the 3-year plan?
That could be hard.
I think take that out, but then we do need to include in there that sale proceeds are ring fenced for. Has that been done separately? Okay. Yes. So note the funds ring fence for investment. Part 4, resolve to deliver council strategic housing priorities under a mixed or independent delivery model approach. From the 2025 financial year. So that's only giving us just over a year. Is that a bit of an ambitious timeline to have fully?
Yep, definitely.
Yes. I don't think we want to put a time frame on that. We want to put a time frame on the actual development of the independent or mixed delivery model. Taking that out, yeah. Note, a mixed or independent delivery model includes, does that need to be may include transferring control of the retirement housing assets to an external body?
And this bit was based off the advice from Chris there, but acknowledging we're at risk of potentially reconsulting. Probably either this was the advice that could reduce that risk.
Yeah.
But there may be better wording for that. Looking at Chris.
No, I think that wording's okay.
Okay, thank you. Number 5, direct officers to develop a procurement and divestment approach to be approved by council that includes a call for proposals and preferred provider with assessment considering, and then remove considering the following criteria, and with assessment. Thanks, Carol. Further down.
Okay.
Direct officers to develop for approval by council key criteria for delivery of the model based on the 5 strategic priorities for the future of council's housing portfolio. Direct officers to engage with tenants, community members and interested parties to communicate council's decision as appropriate. And 7, note council maintains delegation on the criteria and final decisions on divestment and contracting a delivery model.
Through the chair, our housing villages are our strategic assets, which we all know, and it's included in our significance and engagement policy. Do we need to state that in one of our
Resolution number 2.
resolution number 2?
Just noting that our
Just
strategic
Note
note that they are strategic assets.
Yep. Just another sentence. Noting these, are strategic.
They are noted in our significance and engagement policy as strategic assets, but we're just noting it here for clarification.
Councillor Brown.
I'd still like to see a timeline on when we'll see that project plan come back to us.
Yeah. So so that's part
Kinda
6. So looking at council officers in terms of that process, which will include working through the key criteria for delivery and the development of the procurement plan. So when would be the time that you would, I think, in terms of coming back to us for our involvement in the development of that, because that would be I guess the next key engagement point for us.
Oh, I was going to suggest the timeline coming back to us, so even one step further, sort of.
And I think that will come through, that's what that is. But
Okay.
what I was hearing from you, Councillor Brown, was that you're wanting to know when the next gateway will be for us to be involved in the development of the key criteria and the procurement plan.
Yep.
Councillor Crown and Councillor Price.
I have a level of uncomfortability about that because to me it seems that we're assessing this in isolation or in a silo from the work program that our staff have to get through. But I do understand the intention of it. I'm wondering if some of the other tools that we have available to us, that we are updated when the project is established. And then from there we use some of those, our workshops, our standing committee meetings, those types of things to give us that surety around timeline and what the implementation plan, when we can see it delivered, etc. I'm really uncomfortable with trying to limit our staff in that way.
So through the chair, thank you for that, Councillor Crown. I think it's difficult for us to give you a timeline because obviously we were waiting direction today. What we could do is in 6 add instead of talking around developer procurement and divestment approach, you could just add including a timeline, which would deal with that issue. So we will report, you're asking for commitment from officers to give you a timeline. That's directing us to do that, and we'll bring that timeline back to when we commence the process and the project. So will that give you the reassurance that you're seeking from officers?
Yeah, I just don't want it to get lost, and if it doesn't have a drop dead date, it could just.
I can certainly assure you this is probably one of our key.
Yeah.
To give you that reassurance, we can add in timeline.
Perhaps it could be minuted rather than resolved.
Including a timeline. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Price.
Yeah, I was talking, I know coming up with a date is near impossible, but whether we could cover that with something like with urgency or a word that keeps the foot on the throttle.
Through the chair, I think everyone, including our tenants and the public, knew that the current operating model was financially unsustainable, and that's why we're here really to talk about our budget and our projects for the next 3 years. And as our chief executive said, this is one of our biggest priorities, and so we don't want to sit on it for too long because it's not going to help us. So we will be looking at it as soon as we can, following a decision from the council.
I have confidence that we're all committed to ensuring that this moves forward as swiftly as it can. So I'm comfortable with the wording, the including a timeline in the resolution that we have before us today. Okay. So I'll just give everyone just a final moment to absorb because there's a lot in there. And then if there's no further questions or discussion, I'll be asking for a mover and seconder. Okay. Eager beavers who are moving and seconding.
I'm happy to move.
Oh, I've already had Councillor Gregg and Councillor Bogue.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were being sarcastic.
No, they were straight up, really were. But I do just want to make sure everybody's comfortable because this is quite a change from what was in the officer's recommendation, although I think it essentially says pretty much the same thing. So we have a mover and Councillor Gregg.
Can I just ask a procedural question, Mayor-wise? In the agenda, we had a note that was consider and make the following resolutions on key consultation items. That was our top, and then these consultation items all sat underneath. I was just wondering if that headline resolution is still there. We haven't made it yet.
I think, it does need to be there.
Yeah. Perhaps we could move it as part of this, and this becomes A, i.e. the first of the. Thank you.
That's a good point. Just that we have got this part at the top of it. And then this is A. Are there a mover and seconder happy with the inclusion of that umbrella statement? So our seconder was Councillor Bogue. I'd invite Councillor Gregg to speak to the motion as the mover.
Look, I've got nothing to say except I'm happy with the amendments. So it's good.
Councillor Bogue.
Well, I've got quite a bit to say. This has been a burning issue for me and for our city for many years. Our 377 flats were built in the 70s and the 80s. And over that time, they weren't adequately really refurbished and maintained in a way that made them fit for purpose for a modern retirement tenant. So in, I think, 2007 to 2018, the council did a 17A review on the flats and Morrison Low, and the recommendations came back with either we sell or lease some of them, or we sell or lease all of them. And the third option of retaining them was not considered. So the council at the time, we were very concerned about the well-being of our tenants and had concerns other than the financial sustainability of the houses. Went back and made the option of maintaining the status quo a consideration. So over the next few years, we have looked at various ways of managing to A, retain these tenants in this secure, subsidised retirement housing, and B, enable them to be financially sustainable. And it has been a very fine line. And as you all know, just 2 years ago, we went to, with our long-term plan, we explored the possibility of keeping all, keeping some, or selling all, and we came back with the decision that we would try our very best to keep them all. However, in the meantime, since then, one of the options or one of the conditions was that A, the rent would go up in order to sustain this financially, B, that we would ask for another 2% rates increase. So it would be a combination of a ratepayer input to make this financially sustainable and the rents going up. Well, the rents went up, but last year when we considered the extra rate increase, it just didn't seem feasible, and it didn't show us that there was any financial sustainability, that this was not something we couldn't keep going back again and again to our ratepayers, asking them for substantial contributions to make this financially sustainable. So, reluctantly, we have once again gone through the process of putting this in our plan and asking our ratepayers and our tenants what would be the best way of sustaining, retaining this very important service that we provide for needy, vulnerable tenants, ageing population, not enough housing, etc. Many not able to move into retirement villages because they don't own their own homes, and also not hitting our ratepayers with excess costs. And I think what we came up with is a good solution, and we've gone out and spoken to not only the tenants but to our ratepayers. It's a compromise. We have decided quite definitely we do want to stick with providing subsidised retirement housing, and we will end up with, I think, 302 of these units, and that's a substantial number for any council to have. We are the second biggest social housing provider in the city after Kaingaora. But we are committed. We've put the tenants at the centre of all our deliberations and discussions. We've tried to find a way through this dilemma that we've got of our ratepayers and our tenants, and I believe that what we've got in front of us today is an appropriate solution to that dilemma. So I really appreciate all the work that's gone in from staff and from council, and the thoughts and additional wording that's gone into our resolution today. And once again, I hope that our residents out there will feel secure that we are thinking of them all the time. If we weren't, we would have sold the lot. But we do want to retain this. We have got a strong principle-based decision in front of us, and I'm very happy to second it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bogue. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you very much. I think that was a fantastic summary, Maxine, of the challenge of this issue, and I know you have championed it for a long time, so I think it's really appropriate that you gave it the introduction that it did. I just wanted to briefly say we've listened to our submitters. I think we have had lots of submitters come and challenge us to be like a business, to treat their assets like they were our own, and to look at ways of making them financially sustainable. And we have had lots of submitters who have said, don't forget about our vulnerable, don't forget to be kind. And I think we've found the right balance. In the words of one of my favourite artists, never be so kind you forget to be clever, and never be so clever you forget to be kind. And I think we've found the right balance today. So thank you, Council, for the work you've done on it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Bearing in mind we have had 3 consecutively speaking in support of the motion, do we have anyone speaking against? No, so I will put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. Fantastic. Good work, team. Thank you so much, Chris, for being with us today to assist us with, just those
My pleasure.
questions. And thank you to the team and Thunis and everybody else that's been involved in this today. Whew, okay. We do have morning tea scheduled for 10 minutes, but I will continue on to our next key consultation topic, which is the resilience rate. And we have Talia here to speak to and answer any questions that we have about this one. And Caroline.
Good morning. Yes,
Welcome,
I've just
lady.
asked Caroline to join me, and we've also got Gary in case there's any technical rates. matters that need to be resolved. So this is just regarding the community resilience rate, currently at 2.45% for year one. We do know that there was general support in the submissions, but it was quite close. So we are here to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Okay, open up for any questions from councillors. Councillor Crystal.
I'm a little concerned that when we did this rate, that and we talk about it being ring-fenced for resilience, and then further on, the coastal hazards, they want to fund out of this rate already. So I'm a little concerned about this being ring-fenced and all of a sudden it's being tapped into. So I guess that's my concern about that happening, and when else will that happen? Because as far as I was concerned, that wasn't something that was part of what this was for.
And I think to add my comment to that, I have a level of comfort with that fund being used to contribute towards the coastal hazard strategy. I think it's 110,000 that council officers are looking for. And I do think that the further development of our coastal hazard strategy does very much align with building resilience. So just to offer my view, and I'd be happy to hear others' views around the table about, some of that resilience rate being used to fund that. And it is actually, it's an increase, it's an additional 110 on top of, I think we've already got some budget for that coastal hazard strategy that we are developing alongside other regional councils. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I concur with both of you. I too have concerns about establishing a fund without clear principles or criteria. I do accept the coastal hazard is a significant issue that we need to address, and that adds to our resilience by addressing that hazard. So I'm torn between the two positions, but I do believe that perhaps we need to set aside some time once this is resolved to clarify some principles around what we believe are appropriate use for the fund. In other words, we have to be very careful that we don't fritter it away on what is effectively operational matters. We need to make sure that it is available for whatever we actually understand to be resilience, and I think there's a need for us to sit down as a collective and establish a criteria for what we believe resilience means.
I think that's a very good point, Councillor Simpson, and I would actually go one step further and suggest that we reduce the amount that we're collecting in year one of the 3-year plan to provide us with the time to develop that exact, as you've just said, rather than remaining with the current rates burden of 2.5%. And following on from that, I'm aware that currently we do have earmarked 362,000 of that resilient rate to go towards emergency management operations, staff training materials, etc., based on the reviews that we've had post-Cyclone Gabrielle. And then we also have the coastal hazard strategy, which the two of those items are 472,000, and I would actually like to propose that we amend the rates, the resilient rate to 0.45%, which will cover those already known costs with a view to us developing. And I could suggest that in year 2 we increase to 1%, in year 3 we increase to 1.5%, but just a phased approach. Councillor Simpson, then Councillor Crown.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, it appears you've read my notes. I too was going to propose that if we hadn't already committed the fund for the first financial year, that we did cut it back in the current economic circumstances, and I think that would be a reasonable way of us to address some of the ratepayers' concerns over the general rate increase. Thank you.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Well, you all are reading my notes too. Yeah, I think that the phased approach makes the most sense, since there is this discrepancy around our understanding of what the rate was actually going to fund. I'll be honest, I'll put it on the table, mine was response. I thought that it was about response. But I do understand the need for us to have some funding, especially considering the reviews that we have commissioned ourselves, and therefore we need to implement the recommendations and our commitment regionally to coastal hazards. So yeah, I'm very supportive of the phased approach, and also in recognition of cost of living and the economic situation that our community find themselves in currently.
Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, through the Mayor, just I appreciate the time for looking at funding and so forth is later on in the proceedings here today. However, just you did itemise some things. I thought it would be worth noting something that's is on the same realm in the emergency preparedness side, but it's not been funded, and that is that it was identified by both Grey Power and NDAG that emergency preparedness for the elderly and more so the people with disabilities, that's not been funded. The estimate is about 15 to 20K. Okay. So just looking at that, easy read stuff, New Zealand Sign Language and Audio and Media campaign for the disabled community for emergency preparedness.
Okay.
So if that doesn't affect
So
things
have
too
they
much.
made a funding, they didn't make a funding request as such though, did they? They've just highlighted?
No, they did highlight it, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I guess we can just ensure that that is related
Included
to council officers in terms of our overarching emergency management planning, so that they include that in their considerations when they're working through. Yeah. I think Councillor Gregg, I saw your hand first, and then Councillor Price.
Oh yes, through the Mayor, thank you. A lot of ratepayers were finding the whole resilience rate ambiguous. I think we need to be really transparent and open about what it's going to be used for. Can we do that through media and comms and just make it really, really clear if we're using that money, what we're going to do with it? Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the fact that this resolution is actually going to make it very clear will certainly assist with that as well. Councillor Price.
You didn't read my notes because I was going to move the whole lot out for a couple of years, only simply because of listening to the feedback on how high our rates are, and I just thought this was probably one area. So the 0.45, do we need that? You brought me across a bit, but I'll just get me a bit further.
So through the chair, a short answer would be yes. We've got some commitments around what we need to do following our own internal review of our response during the cyclone, and we are aware of other directions that came out of the Mike Bush report. So that's the majority of that, and then the coastal hazard strategy funding of 110K as well. So as I say, so those aspects which would take you to the 0.45, we would encourage you to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown, we haven't heard from you yet, then Councillor Bogue, then Councillor Simpson.
Through the Mayor. Whilst I agree with quite a lot of what's been said, I'm kind of struggling with this one. We're talking about funding activities that we currently already do with a new rate, which to me a new rate would be for a new activity. And like Councillor Crown mentioned, I thought this new rate would be putting some money aside for the rainy day, the very rainy day where we need to do response and recovery. So I'm concerned that we're using a new rate to fund activities that we know we need to fund, but I think it seems a little false to be funding it out of a new rate rather than the existing general rate. And then I suppose there's a second element to that is around, this would be a universal annual general charge. And there's equity issues that I think we need to think through around funding these things which would typically have been funded out of a general rate, which is done based off property value, and then putting it into a fixed rate, which disproportionately affects our poorer people. So, or those who own less expensive properties. So yeah, I'm struggling a bit with this one.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. And just to comment on that we're funding things we already do, we're actually not. We're significantly extending what we currently do internally in terms of the emergency management operations, based on the direction that was provided to us through our own Napier City Council review post-cyclone. So for me, it is a significant shift in the level of service that we are providing, and so I'm therefore comfortable with this new resilient rate being used to fund that.
Supplementary question, I suppose, would there be any part of this first year put aside for a response function, or would it all be used up in preparation under the
It would,
the
yeah,
numbers.
it would all be being used for preparation. I think we're acknowledging that we don't actually want to create a reserve at this stage until we've had the opportunity to clearly define what that reserve will be used for, whether that part of that's response, readiness, the 4 Rs. So at this stage, we're indicating that we would only be funding the emergency management increase in level of service and the coastal hazard strategy. That would be essentially what the money would be going to.
Okay.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I came to this meeting with similar feelings to Councillor Price, having heard the angst and anger and how upset people are about the rates increase. And I appreciate there's obviously an attempt to reduce the 2% in the first year anyway. But my question is, if we don't agree to this 2% resilient rate, where will the money come from that would be spent using this rate? So it's for staff, really.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. And as I said, at this stage, there's only been the 2 issues we've been discussing. So the emergency management operations and coastal hazard is the only thing council officers have currently earmarked to utilise the resilience fund. So by reducing that 2.45% to 0.45, that's not stopping them from doing anything they'd already planned to do. All it is stopping us having a reserve of 2% sitting there.
So through the chair, there obviously will be some capital projects that we may well have associated with that. We would have to look at our capital programme again. But for us, at the moment, those 0.45, which covers those 2 elements, obviously are the key things that we would ask that you consider retaining in your resolution.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Mine was probably similar along the lines of Councillor Brown. It was just clarification around the CEDM activities to be sure that the activity that we're funding is the implementation of the recommendations of the reports that have been undertaken. So effectively, are they one-off costs as opposed to what would be ongoing recurring costs?
So through the chair, again, probably difficult to answer. So this was looking at our own capacity based on our own internal review. We haven't had direction out of KEG and others around the regional response. So it is highly likely there will be additional costs which are not included in this, but we are not aware of what those costs are yet as that work's still underway.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Just a question. The percentages that'll go on in the year 2 and 3, would they be dealt with in the annual plan, or would we be setting them in concrete today?
Well, you always have the opportunity to relook at them, but we were just suggesting that we do put some indicative ones in there now to show a commitment to growing the resilience fund, because we did hear through submissions that the community was supportive of that. So it was just to really show that there was a desire of council to increase that over time. But we can certainly relook at that at each annual plan process. Yeah. Councillor Taylor. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, and through the chair, you may want to add an additional element to that in terms of having some workshops to actually identify the projects that would be used for that 1%. And we will have more clarity out of the regional Mike Bush KEG work as to what our requirements might be too. So there'll probably be some more clarity about what would be asked of us following their review, which would go into year 2.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm in agreement that we reduce it in year 1. My concern is that we are looking to utilise 0.45% to implement the recommendations. I wouldn't like to see that the Resilient Fund becomes the bank for future recommendation implementation, that this is the first phase of getting it implemented, and then it becomes a resilient fund for the very rainy day in the future.
Yeah, so I think we definitely need to include in the resolution that we will be developing having a workshop to develop the criteria around the future resilience fund. And I liked your words, Councillor Simpson. Can you remember what you said?
Yes, Madam Mayor, because I have them written down.
Fabulous. Can you give us those words for the resolution?
It was establish the principles and criteria for use of the fund.
For use of the, the principles and criteria for the use of the resilience. Councillor Crystal.
Just through the Mayor, yes, I like those words, Councillor Simpson, because in reading the submissions and through what I personally thought, I really did think this was about response. And I think people thought this was our rainy day money, that when another disaster happens, whatever form it takes, there is something there that we can kick into and use to help our people. So that, I think, is a really important part of this.
I agree, Councillor Crystal. And the other side of that for me is that we need to actually build capacity and capability to be able to respond full stop. And that is what, that Emergency Management Operations Fund coming out of this is for. So, I do agree that we have a requirement to actually build a fund for responding to events. Councillor Brown and then Councillor Bogue.
Just following on from Councillor Crystal's thought there, you've suggested 0.45. What if we went to 0.5 and that small amount started that fund for the rainy day?
Appetite around the table? I just thought it was made it nice and clean, taking 2% off. Really? It's just the accountant and me.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I like the idea, but I think we should do that in year 2 once we've defined those criteria.
Councillor Bogue.
So in reducing the amount this year, we're not removing the 2% altogether, are we? We're just deferring it.
Well, at this stage, we're taking it out of year 1. So we're reducing the year 1 rates by 2%.
Yes, I get that. But
and then what I have proposed is that in year 2, we increase it to 1%. In year 3, we increase it to 1.5%. Just as place markers to show that we're committed to increasing it. And then, of course, in every annual plan process, we can relook at those figures and change them if we would like to. Okay, so Carolyn's been typing furiously, so we'll pop up on the screen where we've landed.
Still 2%, isn't it? But it's no, not 2%.
So, building our community resilience. Part 1, resolved not to include the full proposed resilience rate. Part 2, resolved to include 0.45% rates impact in year 1, a 2% saving from proposed rates. That will be as a uniform annual general charge. Part 3, phase in the resilience rate of 1% in year 2 at 1.5% in year 3. Part 4, ring fence the resilient rate to fund the emergency management operations and the coastal hazard strategy joint committee contributions in year 1. 5, note the annual plan for years 2 and 3 to detail the ring fencing funding criteria for the resilience rates in year 2 and 3. And 6 is to establish the principles and criteria for the use of the resilience fund. Are you happy to move?
Happy to move.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Seconder, Councillor Taylor. I invite you to speak to that, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I think this is an important step for our council. We've experienced an important step for our council. We've experienced a number of events over the last couple of terms that have demonstrated to us our need to be better prepared and more resilient to events. This fund will effectively provide for us an insurance scheme with a benefit. The benefit is that we can draw on the scheme and we can take actions to improve mitigation within our environment. And I think those are the important criteria, and those are the things that we have to consider when we set principles and criteria. So I think the the members of our community that submitted on this proposal and gave us a little bit more enlightenment as to their comfort zone and what they thought about the principles or the concept. And I look forward to the debate around principles and concept. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
It's ironical that two former civil defence officers move around the seconder office.
Is your microphone on, Councillor Taylor?
It is now, yeah. Two former civil defence staff have been moving and seconding this particular part. I'd just add to it that we acknowledge that the rates increase is considerable, and that was a major theme that we have had over the last 2 days, and that by taking this action, we are reducing that burden initially, but we are also putting in place something that needs to be in place for the future resilience of the city, and a phased approach is far more appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Invite any other speakers to the motion.
May I just ask a question? Sorry. In the original, in our agenda, with the original 2%, the officers said that it would be a charge of 85.90 cents per rating unit, and I'm wondering if there's a new figure for that.
We've only just let them know, so look at this. It'll be a fifth. 85 divided by 5.
Around $35.
How much was that, sorry?
Around $35,
Yeah.
roughly.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Crystal?
It's currently, that amount is currently in our motion, just so that amount have to be in there, no? So we need
There's
to
not a
take it out.
requirement to have the dollar amount in there, is there?
No, good. So that's taken out.
Right. There's no further speakers to the motion. I will put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Nice work. Okay, so time for a quick break. If we could be back at 5 to 11, please. Just carry on. Officer who is presenting to us and answering any questions. Welcome, Gary.
Good morning, everybody. Hello.
Oh, and Jess, and Caroline.
So I haven't got any presentation to put up, but I thought it would be worth just going through a couple of the items that have been mentioned over the last few days. So with the CCTO, it's new territory for council, and so this is something that we will, if adopted, we will be going into carefully. There's several considerations we need to look at. Things such as the framework for it. So if you consider, say, building a building, often there's a lot of time spent on the foundations because if you've got shaky foundations, and the rest of the building's going to likely fall over. So we need to focus on that. So things like statement of intent. We also need to look at capability within our team and also within the CCTO as well. So there are skill gaps that we have. I know I'm a specialist in the investing space. We've got great analysts. We've got people that understand property management, but there's also things around project management and other stuff that would need to be considered as part of this. So there was concerns also around, CCTO being this big separate entity. Any assets managed or transferred over to a CCTO, it needs to be stressed that it's a council-controlled trading organisation. Council owns it. It's answerable to council. So the guidelines of how it operates, including socially responsible investing, would be set by council. Really, what this entity would be is a specialist unit that has pure focus of trying to make money for council and reduce the rate burden for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Open up for any questions from councillors. Councillor Crown.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. So just touching on a couple of the points that you made, Gary, if we were to resolve to start the setup of such an entity, I would be really keen to understand what tools beyond statement of intent, letter of expectation, that type of thing, that those were the concerns that we heard from our ratepayers. What other tools we have in place to ensure, I suppose, transparency and understanding, but also probably to signal that in the resolution, I'd like to see something around investment framework, or especially around the ethical stuff, as you touched on, but also as we heard from our community as well, about what that framework might look like, or how we go about establishing something like that. So, yeah.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Absolutely. So the creation of a CCTO is not an instant thing. It will take time, and the council will be heavily involved in making decisions around this. So with regards to aspects such as socially responsible investing, council's already seen a draft statement of investment policies and objectives for a managed portfolio that we're also looking at as part of this. And so within that, we did have information in there about the requirements to invest ethically and socially responsible. Essentially, the values of council need to reflect the values of the community in which it operates, and so that is something that would be part of the consideration for setting up any activities for the CCTO.
Councillor Crystal.
Through the Mayor, just I don't claim to be an expert in this at all, but my question is, are there roles currently in council that will move over, or staff that will move over to the CCTO, and does it work like that, or will they be new staff that are employed? How does that part work?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that hasn't been established yet. But just to sort of talk a little bit about the roles within council, some of the issues that we do face is that often we'll wear many hats. And so for myself, I look after the rating side of things, property, investments, and a few other bits and pieces. And so I can't fully focus on just the investment side. And so as part of the work that we do, we'll need to make decisions around this, the structure of the staff within it, that sort of thing. So to be determined, I think, is probably the best answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add to that?
Councillor
sorry, I thought I would just add to that. So I think the The time frame and the timeline around that would be we would establish the legal entity for the CCTO, and then we would effectively recruit for the board appointments, and then the board would recruit for their staff, so they would recruit for a chief executive and any other staff for the CCTO.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I think my question has partially been answered, and all I was really seeking was clarification for anyone watching or residents that may have some continued reservations over this option. It says in the consultation document, decisions will be done by dedicated experts. Independence of CCTOs has allowed other councils to access people with suitable governance and management experience. So by implication of those statements, how do you see the people that are on that organisation, the decision makers, being selected or recruited or appointed, or how do you see that being done, and would there be selection criteria?
So that would be a decision of this council, and council could decide to either appoint a subcommittee of council to make the appointments, or it could be by full council decision.
So in terms of, we've currently got the airport as a CCO, and Hastings and ourselves as shareholders are actually involved in the appointment of 2 of the board members on that board, which goes through, a thorough recruitment process based on the required skills and expertise to be able to be a governor in that particular industry. So I would imagine that it's a very similar type of process would be used for their board appointments.
That's right.
Yes, that's through you, Madam Chair. I didn't want to lead the answer, but I'm guessing that these would be independently appointed independent directors with a suitable professional expertise and qualifications.
So the construct of the board would be a decision of council, whether or not they would be all independent directors or whether it would be a combination of council-appointed directors and independent directors. So that governance construct would be a decision of council, and that process is yet to be worked through.
Councillor Berg.
Yes, thank you. I just wondered, would we be in a position where we could give any sort of ethical overview of kinds of investments that we wouldn't like, or do we have would they have complete ownership of those decisions?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the ability for the CCTO to invest is the scope is determined by council through statement of intent, and it needs to abide by those restrictions or limitations that are placed on it. So when setting that up, there should be a lot of discussion around it and good understanding of what socially responsible investing means to different people as well. So that would certainly form part of the framework for the investment guidelines, or what it's allowed to do.
Okay. Councillor McGrath.
There was a few people, or a lot of people, who weren't quite up for a CCTO. What sort of benefits do you see the CCTO being able to bring as opposed to a really good in-house setup?
Through the chair. So CCTO was actually touched on yesterday. Sometimes, especially, there can be difficulties in partnering with council. Council has certain obligations to public through consultation, a lot of other things. A CCTO can help cut through some of those complications because it's focused purely on the investment side of things. So if it's given a particular task of managing a portfolio, then that is what it will do, and nothing else. So although it does have to regularly report to council around its activities, profitability, all those sorts of things, in terms of engaging with other partners, it's a simplified process. It's effectively potentially, say, a company partnering with a company. Yeah, it's basically, it's a fit-for-purpose product. So you wouldn't use a butter knife on a steak. That's probably the best way to put it. And so if it's a steak, use a steak knife. And a CCTO is designed for that.
Okay. Gary, noting that there were some submitters who were concerned about the independence from council and councillors, are there other CCTOs around the country where they actually have elected members, governors, as representatives on the board of the CCTO? Acknowledging that they would have to be bound by the statement of expectations alongside all the other board members?
Yes, it's not an unknown thing around the country. Typically, what they try to do is find the best person for the job in those roles, but there can be council representation. My only concern with that is that it's not excessive representation, because sometimes the purpose of the CCTO can be diluted by the competing demands of a councillor.
Yeah. So on that note, have we got to the point where we know how many board members we would anticipate having on the CCTO? We may not have. I'm just asking the question.
No, I don't think we've made any recommendation about the size of the board, but I think we would be recommending a fairly sort of small board, either 4 or 5 members.
Yeah.
And I think we have made recommendations in some of the supporting documentation about it being a majority independent board with an independent chair, but certainly having some representation from elected members on the board as a recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I think, just following on that, can you give me an example of a hugely successful CCTO or a successful CCTO that has been formed from a territorial authority?
Through you, Madam Mayor, absolutely. Quayside Holdings, I think they started out with a couple $100 million. They're worth well over $1 billion now. It's significant. They have issued shares to the public, but it's still a council-controlled trading organisation. The money that was raised from that was used to reinvest back into council activities. It's been very, very successful. And we do actually use a consultant that was involved in Quayside, helping guide us through this process.
Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you for that, Gary. Just looking at balance, is there some examples of some poor performing CCTOs?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have numerous examples of ones that have failed, and it's quite a good thing to have. You don't want to just see the success stories. You want to see how and why a CCTO can go wrong. And so good examples are ones where it becomes an all-singing, all-dancing object, a Swiss Army knife. A Swiss Army knife is a useless product. It doesn't do anything well. And so with the CCTO, you would be looking at something that's quite specialised. We wouldn't give it everything to manage. We'd give it a select few things with the objective of creating something that's going to succeed, not something that's lumped with poor assets and is likely to fail. So that's probably some of the key learnings we've got from that. Also around the structure, we need to be very clear in the purpose of the CCTO. And in many examples of failures, that focus or purpose has been lost. And so failure has occurred as a result.
Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, through the Mayor. Some of our submitters talked about responsible investment, and I went to a very interesting presentation the other day around responsible and ethical investment and learned about impact investment, which was really exciting. Just checking that within the process of us developing this, that would be a consideration that Council could put forward as a potential avenue for them to look at.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Absolutely. This is one of the foundational steps of creating that, and something that I'd be looking at with Council. Essentially, we want a body that is not going to appear in the newspaper for the wrong reasons, because it is a council entity. And so the other thing that we'd also be looking at is just spending time talking about what a socially responsible investment is, or what ethical investing is. It means different things to different people. Mm-hmm. You've got positive screening, negative screening. I've spent many years researching this space, and so it's something I'm actually looking forward to taking Council through.
Hey, I might just get Carolyn to pop the officer's recommendation up, so we can have a look at that, and then based on the conversation that we've had and questions, if we feel we need to add anything into that. It's the current recommendation is pretty straightforward, is that we create a council-controlled trading organisation to establish a commercially focused investment portfolio, and that council direct officers to begin the process of creating a council-controlled trading organisation by commencing work on the statement of expectations. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Mayor Wise. Just listening to the conversation around that investment framework, would it be helpful to have some guidance around those two key discussion points around having governance involvement and having socially responsible investment? Or are we confident that through the process that'll be developed?
I think because, and what I would probably say is that we just put on the end of part one for adoption by council, although the statement of expectation wouldn't necessarily include the governance structure, or so it's almost a separate investment framework, isn't it? Yeah. And just us perhaps providing some criteria around our expectations in that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a point two, and the two things we've discussed is NCC governance representation, but I think it's the development of a governance structure, including council governance representation and the social and ethical responsibilities. So note criteria in the development of the investment framework to include those two things.
To include governance structure.
Including council governance representation.
Madam Mayor, just a question, if I may, Button.
Yep.
What would be the difference between the statement of expectations and...
Sorry, one moment, including
sorry.
council governance representation. Sorry.
What would be the difference between the statement of expectations and an investment framework?
The investment framework is more around the principles that underpin the way that the CCTO operates, and then the statement of expectation actually then is more detailed around what we actually expect them to deliver and what the outcome expectations are. Is that a fair description?
Yes, sorry, just to expand on it a little bit. So you would have multiple activities occurring within the CCTO, so potentially land development, property ownership, managed funds. And so they all run slightly differently, and it's important to have those principles underpinning each of those activities. So you can have a general comment about it within the investment framework, but then be more specific within each activity.
Council governance representation. And then secondly, social and ethical responsibilities.
And ethical.
Yeah.
So I'll do that as lightly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, just give everyone a moment to read that. Come back with any...
Through you, Madam
Councillor
Mayor,
Simpson.
I just wondered whether the inclusion of the word council representation might be a bit presumptive, and I just wonder whether we should just put governance structure, which then allows us and management to look at options and opportunities, rather than be fixated by the term that there's council representation on there. I think a more open statement gives us more options.
Everyone happy with that amendment?
Yeah.
Any further comments or feedback? I have a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Simpson and Councillor Crown. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I think this is a great opportunity for our council and community. A CCTO represents the opportunity for an organisation to cut to the chase and get things done, make returns on investment in a far quicker, more efficient and effective manner than we as a government, quasi-government organisation can. And I think it will be, when we look around the country, it demonstrates great opportunities for us to offset rate costs into the future.
Councillor Crown.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Absolutely agree, Councillor Simpson. I think this is another example of how we are looking to become more businesslike. This business that we're in is actually about community outcomes, and so that is the purpose of establishing vehicles like this, is to explicitly return a benefit to the ratepayers in the future in the easiest way possible, leveraging what belongs to them already. So in my mind, it makes sense. It's another step. The challenge that we've been given by our community through the submissions is to be more businesslike in many ways, but also, motivated by the right thing, which is to benefit them now and those ratepayers of the future too. So I think of it as a very positive step forward.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, I'd also like to talk in support of this and just take our minds back to a number of years ago when we were talking about parklands as the cash cow of this council, and that parklands is gradually becoming smaller and smaller, and we have been looking for an opportunity of investment, and we haven't found that opportunity of investment, and here is a tool by which we can do that. So I'm fully supportive of the establishment of this CCTO to assist us into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We have had 3 speak in support of the motion, and it's looking like Councillor McGrath is going to speak in opposition.
Yes. I don't support this with the CCTO. I'd prefer to keep it in-house and do it well. And I accept that currently we haven't done it well, but I don't think we've given it a really good shot in-house. It can be set up as a separate activity group and let to do their thing. And let's see how that goes. When we did our workshops, for me, we didn't get balanced reporting. We heard about the Bay of Plenty model, but we didn't hear about the models that didn't do so well. And if you've been in the media in recent times, Wellington Water, I think, is a CCTO, $51 million unaccounted somewhere in there. Half the directors of the Christchurch CCTO, I think, have just quit. And closer to home, there's a lot of our community who don't think highly of, I think it's H-Brick for the regional council, over the dam and selling off the income stream to ACC. So I don't think we have the trust of our community as yet to be moving decisions further away. I would have liked to see us walk before we sort of run. Setting up a CCO has costs to it also, as opposed to doing it in-house. So I'm certainly not ready to head along those lines. If you came back to me in a couple of years' time and said, look, we've run it in-house the best we can, this is where we're at, but I think we could do a little bit better, then that would be a decision for the council. But I think we're looking to go from nothing to everything without giving it a shot in the middle.
Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Brown.
Kia ora. I'd like to speak in favour of the motion. I think the opportunity a CCTO provides us is to have highly skilled specialist people working on this in what is possibly or likely to be a part-time capacity in some cases. So those highly skilled specialist people can be working for a number of organisations, whereas if we were to do it in-house, we would likely need to do more like full-time staff or pay very high wages to attract those people. So I think this provides us with a unique opportunity to leverage the skills and experience that are out there in the market in a way that they operate with the employment market. And I think we have the opportunity to make sure that our current ratepayers and the ratepayers of the future are protected through the inclusion of responsible and ethical investment philosophies, of which those specialists out there are already have expertise.
Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through Madam Mayor, I would also like to speak in favour of a CCTO. I think it's a great way of council actually making some money and keeping our rates down. Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Yes, I speak in support of it, and I think what I like about it is independent. So people should trust that it is on the nail and should be right rather than in-house. So thank you.
So again, we've had 3 speaking in support. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the contrary? Councillor Simpson, would you like to have your right of reply?
Have to get into the habit of pushing that button. I believe the discussion here, or the debate, has been fair and representative, demonstrating both views, and I think that just supports the fact that as a council we'll be cautious as we move into this new environment. Thank you.
Thank you. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against?
Against.
Councillor McGrath. Carried. And who, sorry? Bogue. Oh, and Councillor Bogue was against as well. Thank you very much, team.
Thank you.
Next consultation topic is the fees and charges review, and I welcome Alistair as the officer speaking to the paper. Yeah. Welcome, Alistair.
Hi, everyone.
And Jess.
Again.
Far away.
Okay, yes, so I'm here to speak to the fees and charges that we proposed. I think it's worth discussing upfront that the key to our fees and charges process is to support the ratepayer by maximising cost recovery for our user charges services. Trying not to get ratepayers subsidising things they're not actually using is probably the principle here. So it's a general process of our budgeting general revenue process where we, as a minimum, aim to cover our costs for these activities. And then further to that, we look at marketing, regulatory sort of areas that we can increase our charges. And we're also governed by the revenue and financing policy targets that we have set for the private versus public aspect of different activities. And ultimately, what we settle on for fees and charges does inform changes that we have proposed for the revenue and financing policy. So the idea of moving back from our preferred option to a 5.6% CPI increase does have a cost to ratepayers of about $4.2 million. So obviously, yeah, that's ratepayers subsidising those user charges activities.
Thank you very much, Alistair, and noting that the officer's recommendation is to proceed with our preferred option, which was around increasing some fees and charges beyond the CPI increase of 5.6%. So I'll just open up any questions from councillors. Councillor Simpson.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to seek confirmation from management that where it's proposed that we increase fees and charges beyond the CPI, that would only be in cases where there's demonstrated costs that we are incurring that have exceeded CPI?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
It's a detailed sort of business unit activity approach where we look at the costs and that's the minimum that we're trying to recover. So, for example, water's had a greater cost increase, so we put a base of 15.6% as the increase there because their cost base had increased higher, so that was a minimum.
Yeah, it's just more a case of reassuring the residents that we're not just willy-nilly saying, we're going to increase this one for the heck of it. I think it's important that we do have a good base.
So there is analysis supporting all of the proposed cost increases, and we don't charge any fees and charges to generate profit.
Councillor Bogue.
I'm just concerned about the advocacy that we heard about Ocean Spa, which comes under here, doesn't it? The Ocean Spa.
Sorry, Councillor Bogue, I think we will address that separately because I don't think we're in a position now to make changes to the Ocean Spa fees, but I do intend to raise that later in the meeting to provide some direction to council officers to do some further work for us to then potentially adopt some different fees further down the track.
Thank you.
I will just say that they are included in these fee increases.
Yes.
at the moment,
Yes.
so-
Yeah. Councillor McGrath.
You just through the chair, having sat through a few finance meetings over the years, and we use CPI, I guess, because a lot of the community understand it. How relevant is CPI to council business? Because we used to get told, and if I remember rightly going way back, CPI takes into account for bananas. We don't purchase bananas for a rule. We purchase pipes and pumps.
Yes, I think local government cost index is probably more relevant. It probably highlights the reason that we're not focusing on that scenario, and we have a lot of preferred increases above that because our costs have increased above 5.6%. Going forward, we could look at local government cost index as a better measure than CPI. But yeah, I think it does highlight the fact that our costs have increased above CPI.
There's no further question. Caroline, I was about to talk to Caroline, so your name was in my head. Councillor Brown, but I will get Carolyn to pop up the officer's recommendation as well.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. There was a concern from one of our submitters yesterday that some of the fees and charges we've put up are must-dos and rather than nice-to-haves. Is there any that we're putting up that you would see as a basic, a fundamental need where we're putting up the prices? What's that?
I mean, there's areas where we needed to increase our fees and charges cost recovery, such as some of the regulatory areas where we weren't actually covering the cost of the business to what we'd set. So those are required. And I suppose there's areas like the commercialisations where we're going a bit further based on how we've decided to run those businesses. Probably haven't quite answered your question, but it's a bit of a need-by-need basis, but
I think, as Alistair's already pointed out, the other alternative option that we have available to us is to rate for most of these costs or to push them back to the general rate. So in terms of need, I guess from our perspective, there is a need to recover the costs. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I get that. I suppose I was looking sort of to satisfy or to get a picture of what sort of the need was, and just having a very quick scan through now, looking at the things that you could not go without. I suppose there's only our cemeteries, and there's not many other things in here that we are looking at increasing that aren't an optional item for people. So, in terms of putting food on the table,
right?
I suppose just addressing that submitter's concern that we were putting up prices that directly impact our really vulnerable people and take away from their ability to provide their needs. Most of these are things that are nice to haves rather than food on the table.
which is kind of the user charges definition.
Yes,
I think.
I think that is, and different members of the community will use these activities to different quantities and measures across the rating base, I suppose. And I suppose that's the comparative to putting it back on the general rate, which is where you allocate it in equal measure across everybody, and everybody pays proportionately to their land value. So it's one or the other, and it's a difficult decision to make either way. The other option available to us, I suppose, is to look at level of service for these activities and looking at where we can reduce them to reduce the costs.
Councillor Green.
Yes, through Madam Mayor, thank you. Yeah, the general feeling from the submissions that we were getting was that people do prefer, in general, user pays because it's more fair than putting it onto everyone. So that was the general feeling we got from reading through. Thank you.
Are there any further questions or discussion before I will just note there, we've got the resolution in front of us, pretty straightforward. So if there's no further questions or discussion, I will ask for a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Mawson and Councillor Taylor. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, just, I mean, this affects quite a lot of people in our community that do use some of our facilities and some of our regulatory stuff. However, I mean, ultimately user pays, and our ratepayers want their rates lower. And certainly looking forward, as you can see from the table included in the report here, is that it would end up being quite costly to our ratepayers if we didn't make this decision. So I fully support it.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, exactly the same as Councillor Mawson. It's user pays. If we stuck at the 5.6, we are adding an extra $4.2 million in cost. I think I'm correct in that, to our ratepayer, and that would be on top of 23.7%. So if we have our underlying philosophy that we've had spoken to us over the last 2 days, is that the increases at 23.7 is too excessive, then we can't go higher than that. So we need to look at the ways that we can keep it below, and by having this flexibility to charge some above the 5.6 CPI allows us to do that. So I'm fully supportive.
Any further speakers to the motion? Councillor Crown.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, fully support Councillor Mawson and Councillor Taylor. I do just want to add, though, that I think this demonstrates the complexity of the business that we are in, when it appears to be counterintuitive that by our preferred option, even though it says to go above something, it actually means that you're saving money. So that's difficult for people to understand. You know, we get practice at it constantly throughout our term, but for a lot in our community, that's not easy. It's counterintuitive. So it's great that we're acting in your best interests. We're acting in the community's best interests in actually resolving this and going with our preferred option and saving $4.2 million. Kia ora.
Had 3 speaking in support. Is there anyone in opposition? Right, so I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Did we need to note that that was with the exception of Ocean Spa, or are we going to include those in there?
No, I think we need to adopt what is currently in the schedule.
And come back and make an amendment if necessary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on to our next consultation topic, a change to how we fund some tourist facilities, and we have Steve Gregory presenting for us in Furness and Alistair.
So, Madam Chair, I would just like to start off by saying that this is really, it's an exciting time for us, because this is one of those times in your, in your career in council that you have the opportunity to really look at a facility as a commercial facility. So, for us to see that the, our submitters and our community supports this, this endeavour, it's great. It's really good to have that, and we're looking forward to the next stage after council's, after your decision. Thank you.
Kia ora, councillors. Through the chair. So look, last year we engaged with a facilities business review to look at all our tourism facilities and really hone in on the commercial viability of them all. And these 3 business activities were identified as our greatest opportunity to recover costs and generate a net profit. So since those recommendations come out earlier this year, we have been working with the finance team to really dive deep into our commercial modelling across these activities. In tandem with this commercial modelling, we have been developing our 3-year detailed business plans. And I suppose it's just to give you confidence, we are scrutinising everything. We are really looking at our revenue opportunities across these 3 businesses, and we are really scrutinising our expenses, because the expenses is the hard part. What is pleasing is these business activities are probably having one of their best financial years for some time, which is encouraging, and it proves the point of our opportunity that is in front of us. The reality is we're not going to be returning a benefit as of 1 July this financial year. It's going to take some time, and hence why the recommendation we've put through the LTP.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Price.
In this proposal, thank you, is there an out, for example, say the pools were doing really well and someone came and wanted a deal on it, would there be an out in this to be able to take that? And secondly, will you be reporting back to us how often as to how they are doing in the plan for 3 years that they're going to make a profit?
I'll let Furnace answer the first one.
Thank you. The first one is about ease in out. The intent that we've got with these facilities are that in the next LTP process, we will report back to council on how they are doing and what is the next steps for them. So it could be, I would rather not try and think about stuff. Let's say it will be positive, and then what the council want to do with them, and we will come back with recommendations on how to deal with it.
Can I just do a follow-up on that? And so if you find one of them is just a dead duck, and probably needs something else to happen, do you have to wait till the next LTP to do it?
No, we will. And Steve will talk about our process of coming to council on a regular basis to give council updates on where we're at. And so it's through that process we will be able to, council will be able to make that call earlier on, so we don't have to wait for 3 years.
I don't believe that would be part of any decisions would probably occur as part of the annual plan, but what I'm hearing is that there'll be regular updates and gateways for elected members to actually engage in the process and then provide direction around looking at other options than what we currently have in our 3-year plan if necessary.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm happy that there is we can cut off if we have to.
Yeah, so through the chair, so our reporting, I suppose the exciting point here is we're doing everything commercial. So we are, internally reporting on the benefit and how well these facilities are performing, even in this current financial year. We're meeting monthly and really scrutinising these businesses. So the intention is to come back to you, as well as ELT, on the performance of these facilities. Because, we need to identify how they're tracking, and if there is a speed bump, to bring that to everybody's attention.
Any further questions? Councillor Brown.
Through you, Mayor, and I'm not sure if you want me to park this question or not, but we had concern from some of our submitters that the Ocean Spa would likely not, they had, what's the word? They were sceptical that this could ever be a investment, a commercial activity. Is it worth asking that now, just that we still have the reassurance, or do you want to handle that later?
I think we need to provide council officers with the time to actually work through the process to establish if Ocean Spa can be a commercially viable business, which is what this gives them the opportunity to do. And then again, as discussed previously with Councillor Price's question, if it becomes apparent throughout this process that is not actually a viable option, we will hear from council officers as soon as they establish that, so that we can then look at other options. Brilliant.
Through the Mayor, can I just say that, since we've taken ownership, there's been a steady growth in all revenue lines within Ocean Spa, and through what's happened within the last 6 to 9 months, there's been no drop. We've maintained a pretty consistent performance from our revenue.
Thank you.
Could they get into
Councillor Bogue.
I just wondered if any of those assets could be put into the CCTO, if they're going to be made financially
That will be
investment.
one of the options. If we come to that point, it could be an option, yes.
Any further questions? I'm just asking Carolyn to pop up the resolution.
It does say.
Again, pretty straightforward. The officer's recommendation is that we loan fund the deficits of the 3 facilities that will become financially self-sufficient commercial businesses, so that we direct officers to loan fund the deficits of the Napier Conferences and Events, Ocean Spa and Kennedy Park Resort for a maximum term of 3 years while they move towards being financially self-sufficient. Happy to move, Councillor Price?
Yes, I'm happy to move that.
And seconded by Councillor McGrath. Would you like to speak to that?
I think my concerns have been covered, and it does say for a maximum of 3 years, so that could be less. It's good that Steve talks about how they're doing so well, but I mean, we've got to be very careful of the fact that turnover is not necessarily profit, and that's what I really worry about, because it will be the first swimming pool in the world to make a profit, I think. So that's my personal view. I haven't got facts from it, but yeah, so I'm in support of it.
Councillor McGrath.
Yeah. Through the chair. Yeah, look, I support this moving forward. It is the first time that we've probably stood back and taken a good look at some of these facilities, as well as the other tourist facilities. I'm guessing we'll be able to see in annual reports which way things are tracking, and I guess the community will also tell us as we move forward. And along the lines of Councillor Price about profit, sometimes success in the council world isn't all about the money. It's sometimes the other well-beings that have been put into the Local Government Act as well. But don't get me wrong, if we're heading along the commercial lines, then that has to play the priority role.
Thank you. Any other speakers to the motion? Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak in favour, and our facilities, including the community, have had a pretty rough ride over the last 3 years, so just want to say thank you to staff for keeping their chin up, and all the best for the next 3 years.
Thank you. Any speakers in opposition? Did you want your right of reply, Councillor Price?
All I want to say is I'd like feedback more than an annual feedback.
I'm sure we will receive it more than annually. Very good point. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to put the motion then. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. So we're now on to our final key consultation topic, being the Napier City Council office accommodation. And we have Darren Gillies.
I was going to say, good to talk about revenue, but no.
Morena, councillors. I don't have an entourage with me, it appears. Maybe someone will swoop in to help if I get this wrong. Thank you for your time this morning. This is year 7 of a very long-term project that we've been on. It was roughly June or July in 2017 that we got the MBS, the DSA ratings for the 2 buildings on our civic precinct. And this is just the next step in delivering back our accommodation and then hopefully our library as well to the original precinct. It's the precinct that you own. It's a piece of land that we have the opportunity to develop and return our officers to one accommodation block. The preferred option that we're putting in front of you is for us as a council to lead that project. That came about after we did due diligence on the PwC business case, that we have the capability to deliver this because we already have a project team in place delivering the library and the council chambers. Its initial impact to rates in year one for the preferred option is 0.17%. And we're looking for that to be endorsed so we can carry on and bring the two projects together essentially, so we can realise the benefit of doing the whole precinct as one construction contract with the least disruption to our community by doing so.
Thank you very much, Darren. Could you just speak a little bit about, because we did have a number of people that had suggested to sell to a developer, and we had a local developer make a submission wanting to actually to do that, and it outlined some of the benefits of that. But can you just talk a little bit about, there were some additional complexities for us with that particular piece of land and property to sell to a developer that would have created some issues for us. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's a couple of things to consider. It's philosophically, does council want to be a renter or a landlord of their own accommodation? That's probably the first principle to look at. Yes, there would require essentially a subdivision of that land to do a leaseback option. Also around the usage of that land as well, we need to go through some planning procedures, which would take 2 to 3 months. Even though if it still is a strategic asset, because it is of significance, any change of usage of that land would probably require a publicly notified process, which also adds some time to programme.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Bogue.
Thank you. Darren, could you just confirm that $45 million is the cost of this project? That was what we got on the significant infrastructure projects over the next 10 years that we, as a council, authorised to include in the consultation document.
That is the current QS estimate for the project, yes. That includes all professional fees and construction costs and fit out as well for the building.
Pity it wasn't in the consultation document.
It was in the supplementary information, but I agree that's hard to find within the details of the paper that was provided on the 8th of February, the Prosperous Neighbour Committee. That was in that paper, but it's not the most easy thing to find. I would agree with you there.
Any further questions? Councillor Price.
I don't know if you would be able to answer this, but if we rebuilt it, what would it cost?
Around 53 million was the QS estimate to build something of a similar size, yes.
Any general discussion before I move on to ask for a mover and seconder? Deputy Mayor Brosnan's happy to move. Councillor Crystal happy to second. I'd invite you to speak to the motion, which I will get popped up. Again, a pretty straightforward one, that we will direct officers to commence work to strengthen and redevelop the library tower for its staff, noting that officers intend to use the same project team that is working on Te Aka to gain efficiencies between these two projects.
Thank you, Mayor Wise. Just speaking in support of the officer's recommendation, I think when we look back over the number of consultations that we have run over the precinct since 2018, there's been a clear direction from our community that we should invest back into the library tower building, that we should be strengthening that, and it's great to see us undertake those business cases to see that not only we can do that in an effective way internally ourselves, but also it is cheaper for us to go ahead with earthquake strengthening rather than any other, for instance, I know demolition of this was on the cards as part of those initial options. So I speak in favour of it in terms of having the support of those past consultations as well as the consultation that we've run this 3-year plan round. If I could just briefly speak to the work that the team has done to try and align this project with Te Aka for us. I think we have seen significant savings in our professional fees as a result of that, and I have a huge level of confidence in the working group and team that sits behind this, Darren, you and your team, to continue to find those efficiencies for us as the projects align. I think that is something we are extremely conscious of around this table, around gaining those efficiencies, and the disruption to the CBD and the resulting effect of bringing this all together, I think, is something our community will be extremely proud of. So very supportive of the officer's recommendations. Thank you, Mayor Wise.
Councillor Crystal.
Did a Simpson. Totally support what Deputy Mayor Bronson has just said. And just to add to that, in our a lot of our feedback was about being fiscally responsible, and in building this building ourselves, I would like to think that we can do this as economically as possible. No frilly things around the sides, as has been described by some of our submitters. And also, one of the big things is bringing our staff back together. I think this is having never ever been in a council chamber as an elected member, or been in one building with staff. I think that the bringing them together makes a better team environment. There was a lot of work from home suggestions. That also is not always the best scenario, and certainly in council there's a lot of jobs that can't be done from home. So I see this as a positive way, and in the long term it will be the cheaper option for our ratepayers.
Oh, gosh, hands going up everywhere. Councillor Bogue.
I'd like to speak against this. I see this as a nice to have, not a must have. $45 million, which was not actually indicated in our consultation document, that there was information that it was not going to make a big difference to the ratepayers in the next few years. However, I think that since 2017 the staff have operated, I guess, under some more difficult circumstances in 3 different sites, and it would be lovely to have them back together, but I don't see this as a must-have or a necessity. And when we have issues with our ratepayers all having to tighten their belts, I think this was an opportunity for us to show that we're just going to put something on hold. I'm not saying drop it forever, but I don't think it's the right time for this particular project.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I speak in favour of advancing this project. It's more than just about bricks and mortar. This is actually about the culture, the productivity, the effectiveness and the efficiency of an organisation. I have worked in organisations that are spread across multiple places. I regularly work from home and commute by Zoom to meetings out of town. I know what disconnection is as an employee or a contractor, and I think what we have to look at as a council, as an elected body, is how we ensure going forward that our organisation's staff are a team that work collectively and effectively. People don't actually appreciate the time productivity loss of staff simply getting to meetings when they're wandering, well, not wandering, I'm sure they're moving quite effectively and efficiently across the town, but as they move, for every staff member that has to move between buildings for a meeting, that's a huge chunk of our productivity time. And I think as an organisation we have to look responsibly at those sorts of issues. Many of the submitters made exactly that point, that we need to seek greater productivity. We need to seek greater teamwork and efficiencies out of our organisation. And this is the classic opportunity to make that happen in the most economical of manners. And might I add, if a developer can do it, I'm damn sure we can do it just as well.
Councillor McGrath.
Bear with me on this one, Your Worship. I am going to speak against it at the end.
Just reminding you, you've got 5 minutes, Councillor McGrath.
we won't go that far. Look, this is a tricky one for me. Affordability for the community. Us being in one building, like the community a few years ago said, hurry up and get back in there. You can't work properly without it. And I get that. If a member of the community wants to come in and speak with somebody and they're told, I'm sorry, you can't, they're working from home, or, oh, they don't work in this building, they work down there, the community gets pretty ratty fairly fast. It's difficult to build teams when you're in 3 different buildings. I absolutely get that. And it is a struggle for me to not support it. So in some ways I'm supporting it. The piece I don't support is the fact that it's been tied in with Te Aka, and currently, and I'll speak against this later on as well, that I don't have a lot of support for Te Aka, but I'm open to all new information that may arrive between now and then later on.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Any further speakers? Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking in support of this. I think, not to labour too much on my point previously around fees and charges, I think some of the numbers that we put out are very difficult for our community to fathom. I think if we weren't part of council, it would be the same for us. But the actual impact on rates is very minimal around this project, and the points that have been made around our team and the productivity that being in a single space would help us to achieve, I think is a very good point, and also raised by submitters. I think that we're spending $1.1 million a year on leases to house our staff currently. So when you do the math, that's about a 30-year break-even amount. And then we have an asset that we also have the ability to gain further revenue from with tenancies. There is space for other people to rent space in there. So the combination of all those things leads me to be able to support this. It would be lovely to have our people all together to see those great things, especially as our community demand more of us also and more of our staff. So I think it's supportive of them, but ultimately supportive of the ratepayer.
Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through the Mayor, thank you. I think as a council, sometimes we have the reputation of dragging our feet or kicking the can down the road. I think we have an opportunity here to sort out a problem, which is a problem. So let's do it and just show the community that we can actually be brave and make a decision.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Tariha.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. As Darren mentioned, it's been a 7-year journey. I've been involved for the 7 years. I've put in over 80 years, travelled to Wellington for this kaupapa, and I'll hate to see it not go ahead. And I look at Te Aka and the council office accommodation as one, and I just fully support this, and I believe it's for the betterment of the community and spread over 20 or so years. And, you know, there's could be commercial space in one of the 2 buildings, and area for kotahitanga and place where we can share stories, and an opportunity to put some artwork in a place where council staff and councillors can be as one. But yeah, just like to speak in support of this.
Kia ora. We've had 3 consecutive speakers in support. Do we have anybody against? No. Right of reply, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Wise, for the opportunity to write a reply. I think that the question that's posed to us first by staff is the right one. Do we want to be a renter or do we want to be a landlord of our own accommodation? And we do that on behalf of our ratepayers. And I think it's really easy for our ratepayers to understand, especially when you read through the submissions, that owning our building is a lot better long-term solution than renting it is. We know that financially this is the right decision. We know that it saves us $1.5 to $1.6 million annually in our OPEX that we're currently spending. They task us to think long term. They don't task us to kick the can down the road, as rightly said by Councillor Gregg. So if we don't proceed with this, you still have an earthquake-prone building in the middle of the CBD that you need to do something with. You would still have disconnected staff, to Councillor Simpson's point. You would still have 3 leases to manage, and you would still have that $1.6 million annual OPEX cost, plus the inflation of what you pay on those CBD leases, plus 3 power bills. So you would still have those costs. You don't have any significant affordability savings in deferring this project. In fact, what you do is kick the can down the road and make it more expensive for future generations to do what we know is needed. So I commend those councillors who, in my view, have spoken the right way on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. There being no further speaking to this, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, if you could raise your hands, makes it easier. Councillor McGrath and Councillor Bogue.
Half up this one.
Carried. Excellent. Okay, well, I think we have worked our way through our 6 key consultation topics. So this is a good time for us to take a break for lunch, which is next door. And we we'll have half an hour. So we'll be back starting at 12:35.